First of all, let's just give set the stage with your background as far as your connections with being raised polygamous and your story.
Yes. So I was part of the LeBaron cult that was active in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And I was born and raised in that family of origin story that is just horrific because my father was one of the worst of the examples of people who practiced blood atonement in addition to polygamy. And for your listeners who aren't aware of what blood atonement is, it's there are some sins that the blood of Christ can't cover. And so we have to atone for that sin with the shedding of our own blood, meaning somebody will kill you.
Mm.
And so more than 25 to 35 people ended up dead as a result. In my memoir, The Polygamous Daughter, the grisliness of those things aren't touched on as much. But in a documentary, a 5-episode documentary on Hulu that's streaming currently called Daughters of the Cult, my sister and I and several of the other of my siblings go into all the details, and they cover all of that really, really well. And we are very happy with the result of the documentary that they did.
It's called Daughters of the Cult.
Mm-hmm. And it's
Okay.
streaming on Hulu right now.
Okay. So tell me, take us back to the origin of how, if, what is the connection with LDS, FLDS, and the group
Yes.
that you were a part of, and how are all the families connected, if they are?
Yes, there's definite overlap between LDS and FLDS people. The way I describe FLDS is that is specifically the Warren Jeffs group and the way that that group is identified. So generally speaking, groups that practice polygamy are referred to as fundamentalist Mormon. And that's the way they want to be referred to. So out of respect, that's the terms I use. You know, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the LDS church, and that's how they want to be referred. So out of respect, I use those terms as well. And that's the modern version of the church that has, you know, made some corrections over the years in some of the ways that they practiced and some of the beliefs and things that they practiced. And so it's a more modern version of Joseph Smith and Brigham Young's teachings. So the FLDS is Warren Jeff's group, is very specific to that. Our group was kind of sort of referred to as the LeBaron group because my father was notorious because of all the criminal activity happening in his group. And but the original church that was started by my uncle Joel was called the Church of the Firstborn. And when my dad and his brother Joel had a falling out and they separated, the Church of the Lamb of God was my father's specific one. So I
And
know
we,
that's a lot of words and a lot of defining terms, and I think it's all necessary when you're having these kinds of conversations.
yeah, that's good because I think a lot of people hear polygamous and they automatically think FLDS. Um, and you were not part of the FLDS group.
That is correct.
Right.
But there are some overlapping of the families. Our group had a lot of interactions with that group when it was known as Short Creek, back when the raids happened in the 50s or whenever that happened, a long, long time ago. There was a lot of overlap in the groups way back then. Fewer now, but I do have cousins and people that are LeBarons that live in that area in um,
Colorado City that
Colorado City
yeah.
and then the other one, and the names are escaping me. But I do have people that I know and have met. I've actually been there when my book came out in 2017. I was invited to the library to do a book reading.
Wow.
So,
Did FLDS members show up?
yes, they did. We had a very interesting and very respectful conversation about my book and my story. And they actually ended up taking copies of my book with them. Many of them did.
Fascinating. Have you happened to hear back from any of them since?
No, but I did get invited back by Zoom by the librarian to help teach people how to tell their stories that were interested in the creative writing aspects of it.
Hmm.
So I just felt like, I don't know if I should say this publicly, but it felt very subversive to know that there were copies of my book, being handed around the Short Creek area.
Yeah. I wanted to get your thoughts on the two missing FLDS kids. I know you're not connected to the FLDS group, but you've kind of studied religious cults. From my
Yes.
understanding, religious
Mhm.
groups.
Yes.
Does that scenario, which is playing out right now, these two kids
Yes.
that are snatched and missing and made,
Mhm.
hopefully they're safe. Does that kind of hit your heart a little heavy every time you hear something like that?
Oh,
What are your thoughts about this situation?
this situation specifically is heart wrenching because I know how much it takes and how hard a woman has to work to get out of that situation. So the mother involved in this that worked so hard to create a life for herself and her children outside of that. And now to have this happening, it just, I can't fathom how much pain and suffering and agony she has been through. Um, but as far as my connection to this, the loose connection that I have, I was talking about this with my sister, who was part of the documentary with me. And she reminded me that our father taught that children belong to the father, not the mother. And so I don't know that that's specifically an FLDS teaching as well, but it seems like it would be something that they might believe. And if so, they have in their minds a legitimate reason for going and taking those children back. And, what I was reading earlier when you sent me those clips is that there's these new revelations from Warren Jeffs from prison that are just very frightening and should be taken very seriously.
Is there a similar line of thinking in the way you were raised as far as keeping the children close under your control uh, in preparation for a sort of second coming? Or some have even said that this could lead to something maybe like Waco, the Branch Davidian compound, things like that. I
Yeah.
mean, does that sound familiar to you?
Our group kept, like, I was born in the LeBaron colony in Mexico, in Chihuahua, Mexico, and it could be considered a cult commune, especially way back then. And they kept very close tabs on everything and everybody. And even though I was born in 68, so I didn't experience things until the 70s and 80s. Um, we were taught to lie to anyone that was considered an outsider. We were taught to answer I don't know to any question from anyone. What's your name? I don't know. Who's your father? I don't know. So the amount of control that was kept over the children and the women, for sure, was egregious
Mm.
and stifling in every way you can imagine, and probably some ways that people who are just normal can't even fathom. The brainwashing is extreme and it's real and caused people that I love, my siblings, people that I love today still serving life sentences in prison for being ordered to go and blood atone other people that I love. Um, the brainwashing is real. When you're born and raised into it, you hardly have a choice or a voice in the trajectory of your life.
Mm.
And so that level of control is real and it's stifling and it's developmentally harmful. And my siblings that are in prison still, they were taken out of school in second, third grade, put to work, completely, work slave labor, 12-hour days, 6 days a week for all the um, child labor laws violations that are rampant in these groups were active in our group as well. And so you just really didn't have a choice or a voice about the kind of life that you were going to live. You did what you were told, and that was that.
I want to go into more of your story on something caught my ear a second ago. You said the Church of the Firstborn. That's something that Chad Daybell was
Mhm.
teaching in
Mhm.
Idaho
Yes.
when he gave his patriarchal blessing to Alex Cox before Alex
Mhm.
died. What can you tell us about the Church of the Firstborn? I guess through your eyes and your family's eyes, Daybell may have interpreted it different, and others might too. But
Mhm.
were you raised in that? You mentioned the name changed down the line.
Right. So I was when the split happened between Joel and my father Ervil. That's right around the time that I was born. So I didn't know anything or experience that other version of it. So I didn't know about the Church of the Firstborn part of it. I wasn't born even at that point. But my family of origin story goes back 4 generations to a man named Benjamin Franklin Johnson, who was the spiritually adopted son of Joseph Smith. So I'm a first generation monogamist, first generation non Mormon of any kind on my father's side of the family. And so the version of that, those break off, those offshoots off of the LDS church that we experienced included polygamy, of course, and the blood atonement. Polygamy taught by Joseph Smith, blood atonement taught by Brigham Young. And when you talk about Daybell and you include all of the Daybell stuff, which has unfolded over the last 5 years or so, I was one of the first people who identified that Chad and Lori were practicing polygamists when they went and got married in the temple to each other when they were both still married to their current alive spouses at the time.
Mm,
And their version of the way they would identify people dark and light, it really ties into the blood atonement um, in the way that they are talking about it in a way like you're doing someone a favor by helping them get to the next probation or the next life, correct? So theirs was multiple mortal probations, and that was a little bit different than what my father taught.
mhm.
But the thread that kind of goes throughout all of them is that you're doing someone a favor
Mm.
by taking their life, both in both cases. And that with that revelation with Warren Jeffs, where I believe it's like we want you to be given a chance to be resurrected as pure beings. There's that same little thread of we're doing you a favor, we're helping you in some way. And that is alarming and concerning and absolutely should be taken seriously. And I'm very concerned for those children's safety.
Mm. So you're born to one biological mother, obviously, but how many wives did your father have?
He had a total of 14 wives.
Did you
And
all live together?
no, no. Ours was not, once we left Mexico after the split happened, um, we were kind of scattered throughout the Southwest United States. And so we kind of blended in like many modern polygamists, they blend in now. You wouldn't know your next door neighbor is a polygamist if they didn't tell you.
So you're
And
not wearing
that's
the long dresses and having the long hair braids. You're wearing
no,
normal clothes.
no more clothes. Well, if you call normal, we had to dumpster dive for food and rob the Goodwill boxes for clothing. So if you call that normal clothes that don't fit quite right and you have to tie them up with a string to keep them on you and the shoes aren't quite, ill-fitting, you know, normal in that regard. But that
Is
those
that because that you didn't have the money, or
right.
the dad just didn't care for the kids?
I met my father when I was 9 and had interactions with him twice, and yet we were labeled, celestial beings, celestial children,
Mm,
so
wow.
special. We were so special. Can you hear the sarcasm in my voice?
Yeah, right. So
so,
special to
so
meet him
yeah,
twice.
yeah, and so the most of the money goes to the people at the top. There's a hierarchy in every kind of situation you can find on Earth, even a pecking order, if you will. And mostly the ones at the top of that hierarchy or pecking order are the ones who are treated better and get more, and all are equal except some are more equal than others was a saying.
Mm.
um, and so we weren't, because my dad was in prison, especially when I was coming of age and kind of seeing things as things progressed. My dad was running his polygamist cult from prison, just like Warren Jeffs. So we weren't at the top of the pecking order because our father, who was the quote prophet, was in prison, and his right hand man, Dan Jordan, was the one in charge. So, his favorite wife and favorite children got the goods, and some of
I
us did
see.
not.
Do you know
So,
how many siblings you have?
in the documentary, in the first episode, all 5 of my siblings that were participated were asked that question, and each of us gave a different answer. And I said, polygamous math is hard.
Right.
And my number is my father biologically fathered 51 children. That's my number.
You said
But you could
51?
51 children.
51.
That's my count. And other people have different counts, and we agree to disagree.
Right. Now, when you say blood atonement, simplified, does that mean murder?
Mhm. Yes,
And why was your father serving time in prison?
because my father never committed one of the murders. He would order his followers to go and carry out his orders. And so in the news media, when these things were happening, he was named, or he was given the name the Mormon Manson, because it was similar to Charles Manson and his followers carrying out his orders at that time.
Wow. Any idea
So
how many deaths or attempted murders that your dad ordered?
there are 25 confirmed deaths. And depending on which investigator is counting, and how much they know, the number goes as high as 35.
Wow. And you mentioned that his right hand man, Dan Jordan, was the one leading the church. So, as your dad's in prison and you're with your mom, were you all still, involved in the church, or what eventually got you to the point where you broke away?
Well, my dad dying in prison when I was 12 cracked open the door. Like the littlest, tiniest crack of a sliver of a crack opened up. And when I was 13 years old, I ran away from home. And I had a half sister, much older than me, one of my father's other wives' daughters. Again, polygamist math is hard. Uh, my half sister and her husband, who were on the fringe of the cult, but not quite out, because if you were out, it put a target on your back. So they weren't quite out, but I knew they lived differently. And so when I decided I wanted out, I called my half sister, and she told me to start walking. And so, spoiler alert, if you decide to read the book, I walked away from my home with just the clothes on my back, and walked a little over 3 miles when she picked me up. So if you do any walking or running, a little over 3 miles is a 5K. I call that my 5K to freedom.
Wow. And tell us, if you can, where your mom ended up.
My mom, after the whole thing of the LeBaron group disbanded in the early 90s. So that one does not exist anymore. Not even my siblings spending time in prison still believe my father was a prophet. Not one of my father's children believe that. I just want to make that crystal clear, because that narrative that LeBaron's children or maybe grandchildren might rise up and whatever, and carry on that is absolute false. We have 35 years of LeBaron's children creating new lives for themselves and making good on the life that we've been given and this opportunity we've been given. So now I can't remember your question.
About your mom. What did
Oh,
your
my
mom
mom.
ever leave?
So when the cult disbanded and the Dan Jordan group disbanded after everything, fell away in 1992, my mom found a new fundamentalist Mormon group to join. It was the Harmston group that was in Manti, Utah. And she ended up joining them and remained there the rest of her life. And she passed away in 2019. And so that ended that era for her. And that group is kind of dismantling itself as well. They're having a hard time, keeping everyone connected. And that's one of the things that I want to talk about is the internet, for as much good as it does and as many evils as it's responsible for. People having access to the internet, having access to information, gives them power to make choices and do things differently if that's what they want to do. A lot of the kids that have left the FLDS say that getting a phone and being able to get on the internet very secretly and being able to Google things about Warren Jeffs helps them really be able to resolve that cognitive dissonance that stays there because they're so suppressed with the information that they're given.
Right.
But having access to the internet gives them power, and it gives them knowledge that they've been able to use. And so that's part of my experience. Now, the internet didn't exist in 1982 when I ran away from home, but watching things unfold, and even with like Chad and Lori Daybell, just because of the modern way that we live now with the internet, with crowdsourcing, with Facebook groups that talk about these things, with the DNA and all of that thing, this kind of helps put a stop to some of these things that would have probably gotten a lot worse with Lori and Chad Daybell had all of these new modern technologies not been able to come to bear on that situation right there. So
right. Yeah, it's able to help expose it. Yeah. I mean, and get it out there and get people to talk about it and see it. Now, the LeBaron group dissolved. You said that your mom's group in Manti is unraveling or nearly there. Do you foresee the FLDS under Warren Jeffs, say when he dies or even during his life? Do you see that group kind of disbanding?
Well, it's kind of been doing that over the years since he was arrested in Texas in 2008. And, things kind of began to unravel at that point. My concern is for the very, very faithful believers who have this. There's a concept in finance where you've invested so much that it's hard to walk away from that investment. And I can't remember the term for it, but that was my mom's situation. She lost every one of her children one by one by one by one over the years. All of us walked away from her religion, and she stayed faithful, and she didn't know any other way. And so there will probably be some who hang on just because there's not a way for them to unravel all the investment of time and money and belief and energy and prayers and whatever they've done. They've invested so much that it's hard to walk away from that. And so those would be the ones that I would have the most just compassion for in some ways, because I watched my mom do it, and it was heartbreaking for me to watch her just stay so ingrained with that belief system that it was hard for her to walk away, even though she had 8 or 9 children that would say, come and live with us, we'll take you in if you want out. And she just couldn't. And so there are going to probably be people who remain faithful, and that brainwashing I was talking about earlier is responsible for that inability for some to walk away and make a clean break.
Yeah. It just becomes, I guess, part of their DNA. I mean, like your mom, it's just who you are, and you need it, and you don't know what it'd be like without it. You mentioned that you have one sibling still in prison.
I have two, a full brother, a half brother, and a step brother
And
still
was this in
serving.
connection to blood atonement, murder type crimes?
Yes, yes, it was. And
Wow.
I have a relationship with them today. All of them have changed their minds, or in religious language, people call that repenting, or you know, having a full turn. Every one of them has had that full 180 degree, walked away from the beliefs that they had, and have created different lives for themselves within the prison system. My one brother, that is my full brother that I'm closest to, as far as the three of them. I mean, how close can you be with somebody in prison, right?
Right. Yeah.
But we do have that connection. He says to me, I am more free now than I ever was in the cult.
Mm. More free in prison.
Mm-hmm. Because
Wow.
his mind is free. When
Right.
your mind is free, you are free.
Right. So how were you able, as a young 13-year-old until now, able to I don't want to say transition, but I guess move forward with life and try to live a normal life? Do you think it helped that you were able to get out kind of earlier versus in your 20s or 30s, or did that make it harder because you were so young and impressionable?
Um, it's hard to get out no matter what age you get out. It's young. It was hard because I had to separate from my mom. She was not a good mom to me. She wasn't a good mom to her children. So I had to separate from her. So that creates a rupture in this relationship that's supposed to be safe and secure. The person who keeps you the safest and the securest, and that wasn't happening. So that rupture happened at a very young, impressionable age, and it made my life very difficult. However, I will say that in 1995, when I was about 25-ish, I'm not doing math right, so excuse me.
It's
But
all
in
right.
about 1995, in my mid 20s, a friend of mine suggested I talk to a therapist. And I was so confused because I wasn't sure exactly why I needed to talk to a therapist. And it turns out I have completed 5 years with that first therapist, and figured out how much help I really needed. I've since completed 5 more years with a trauma informed therapist, and just undoing the harm by childhood developmental trauma, all the egregious ways that we experienced abuse, every abuse you can imagine, and some you've probably not thought of. Abuse, neglect, abandonment creates childhood developmental trauma, and sometimes results in what they call complex PTSD,
Mhm.
which I've been diagnosed with. And so 5 years with one therapist, 5 years with a trauma informed therapist, because trauma informed anything is kind of new. Um, and I'm currently working with a new therapist since moving to Washington State, and working at resolving some just little things that where you begin to notice limitations or self-imposed limitations that my upbringing superimposed on me,
Mm.
and behaviors that are like unwanted, and working with the professional therapist to untangle and unravel those things. And I'm currently working on a doctorate, on a doctoral degree. And I'm going to be taking everything I've learned about healing from trauma and applying that when I write my dissertation.
Oh, good for you. Anna LeBaron, the name of the book is The Polygamist Daughter, and tell us again the name of the docuseries on Hulu.
Daughters of the Cult.
Daughters of the Cold. Thank you for sharing your story with us. I know we only touched on it just to scratch the surface. So,
Yes.
for those of you out there, you can order the book. I was reading through it
Mhm.
earlier today, and I look forward to finishing it, and appreciate your expertise or experience with this topic.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like a subject matter expert in something nobody wants to be a subject
Yeah.
matter expert in.
Right. But hopefully, by sharing your expertise, it can reach somebody out there to
Yeah,
realize, that
yeah.
maybe they can get help too. Maybe these two kids who are missing, if for some chance they see this, they realize that they can get help.
I mean, nothing would make me happier or give me more joy than to know me sharing the painful aspects of my story puts someone else on a path to more healing and wholeness.
Yeah. Well, thank you.